I reckon a man learns the shape of death long before it comes for him. But that night on the rooftops of Red Valley, death came screaming with gunpowder on its breath. Flames were crawling up the bank walls like hungry wolves, spitting sparks into the sky. The whole street below was a storm of gunfire and busted glass. Horses reared, men cursed, lantern oil spilled and turned the dirt road into a river of fire. And there I was, bleeding through my shirt, lungs burning, trying to hold steady on a rooftop that felt thinner than a prayer. Beside me crouched Clara Reyes, her silhouette carved sharp against the blaze. Bandana pulled up to her cheekbones, hair tied back, hands steady on her rifle even though I could see 'em tremble just a whisper. She glanced my way, eyes glowing gold with reflections of the fire. "Hold still," she said, pressing cloth to the bullet graze on my ribs. Her voice was soft, but her hands carried the truth. She wasn't ready to lose me. Not here. Not tonight. Bullets slapped the bricks inches above our heads, sending dust raining onto our shoulders. Down on the street, 6 riders circled the bank like vultures who'd already tasted our blood. I recognized the mark on their coats. Mason's gang. The kind of men who didn't miss, unless they wanted to make you squirm first. One of them yelled out, "Reyes, bring us the drifter and we'll let you walk." Clara's jaw tightened. She didn't bother answering. She just chambered another round. A gust of hot wind carried smoke up to us, thick as sin. My eyes stung, my wound throbbed, and the whole damn rooftop groaned beneath our weight. The fire was climbing, roof tiles cracking under the heat. And then I saw it, rolling down the center of the street like some devil-made machine. A Gatling gun. The men cranked it slow, almost polite, like they wanted us to feel every click echo in our last seconds. Clara's breath hitched. Mine did too. "That thing starts spitting, we're bones," she muttered. She wasn't wrong. I pushed myself up on one knee, pain shooting up my side. She grabbed my shoulder, tried to steady me. "You can't fight like this," she whispered. "Wasn't planning to," I grunted. Her eyes narrowed. "Then what?" The plank beneath us split with a loud crack. Flames licked higher, crawling toward the roof like they'd been summoned. The only path left was straight down. I pointed at the alley on the other side of the roof, a dark gap between burning buildings, full of smoke and God knows what below. Clara followed my gaze, then shook her head. "That's suicide." "Maybe," I said, "but staying here's a promise." Below, the Gatling gun clicked into place. Metal spun slow, hungry. Clara looked from the alley to the machine gun, to me. Her eyes softened with something I'd never seen pointed my way before. Something warm, fierce, scared all at once. "Jump with me," she breathed. Gunfire roared. The roof buckled. Smoke swallowed the stars. I took her hand, squeezed it hard enough she'd know this wasn't panic. This was choice. "On 3, I whispered. She nodded, lips parting just barely. The kind of breath a woman takes before a kiss, or a death. 1. The Gatling gun spun faster. 2. The rooftops sagged beneath us. 3. We leapt into the burning dark together, guns clutched tight, hearts hammering, the whole world falling away beneath our boots. And for one suspended moment in that smoke-stained night, before gravity remembered us, I swear I felt her hand tighten like she wasn't just jumping to survive. She was jumping to stay with me. We hit the ground hard, not graceful, not clean, just 2 bodies falling out of the sky and praying the dirt below was softer than the flames above. I remember the crunch of broken crates beneath us, the sting of splinters digging into my back, and Clara's breath knocking out of her chest with a sharp, pained gasp. But we were alive. Sometimes that's all a man can ask for. I rolled onto my knees, ribs screaming, visions swimming in smoke. Clara grabbed my collar and dragged me behind a water trough, just as the Gatling gun tore the rooftop apart. wood erupting in 1,000 fiery shards. "Move!" she hissed, her voice rough but steady. Always steady. We sprinted down the alley, boots slapping through puddles of lantern oil, shadows stretching long behind us. Above, the flames roared like they wanted the whole damn town. Mason's men didn't let up neither. Bullets chased us, hissing past my ears like angry hornets. By the time we reached the stables outside town, my breath was a torn-up thing, fighting to stay inside me. I leaned against a post, hand pressed to my side. That's when I felt it. Warm, wet, too familiar. Clara ripped open my shirt before I could stop her, lantern light catching the red smear across my ribs. "Hold still," she said, voice tight. Her fingers pressed around the wound, and I bit down on a curse. Pain flared sharp, but then her touch softened, turned careful, almost tender. She traced the ragged edge of the graze, her brow furrowing like she was seeing something far worse than what the bullet had done. "It hit the same scar," she whispered. I nodded slow. "That old one never healed, right?" Her eyes lifted, and for the first time since I'd met her, Clara Reyes looked afraid. "No," she said. "You don't understand." She reached into her coat and pulled out the bullet she'd dug from my shirt. She held it to the lantern, and there, carved right into the lead, was my name. A cold breath slipped between my teeth. "Damn," I muttered. "That ain't something a man sees every day." Clara swallowed hard. Her hands were steady, but her voice cracked just enough for me to hear the truth trembling through it. "They weren't shooting at us for the money," she said. "They weren't even shooting at you." She paused, eyes glinting with the weight of something she'd been carrying too long. "They're chasing me." The wind pushed through the broken stable boards, stirring dust into slow, ghost-like swirls. Somewhere out in the dark, a horse stamped nervously, like it knew trouble was listening. I stared at her, chest heavy, thoughts turning slow. "All right," I said softly. "Tell me why." She looked down at the bullet again, thumb brushing over the carved letters of my name. "Because," she whispered, voice thin as smoke, "if they can't get to me, they'll kill the man riding beside me." Her words landed harder than the fall from the roof, harder than the bullet. Some dangers in the west come at you loud, guns blazing, hooves thundering, dust rising like a curtain before the kill. But Clara's danger, her danger was quiet, patient, personal, and now it was mine. She met my eyes, breathing uneven, the firelight catching the fear she'd tried to bury. "I didn't want you mixed up in this," she said. "Too late for that. Way too damn late." I touched the bloody edge of the bullet, turned it between my fingers. "Whoever carved my name into this," I said slow, "they ain't just hunting, they're sending a message." Clara nodded once. "They are," she whispered, "and the message is simple." Her eyes narrowed, fierce for the first time that night. "Run." The stable door creaked. Hoofbeats echoed outside. Mason's voice rolled through the dark like thunder. "Found 'em!" Clara's hand shot to her pistol. Mine did too. And just like that, our night of running had only just begun. The desert at night don't forgive much. It don't hide you either. It just watches, quiet and patient, like it's waiting to see which one of you dies first. Clara and I rode hard, hooves hitting the hardened earth with the rhythm that sounded too much like a countdown. Behind us, far enough to pretend it wasn't real, but close enough that we couldn't forget, came the echoes of Mason's men. Low laughs, wolfish grins, pockets full of bounties and hearts empty as dried wells. Clara kept glancing over her shoulder, lips tight, hands white-knuckled around the reins. She wasn't scared of the dark, and she sure as hell wasn't scared of riding. No, her fear was something else entirely, and it was tied to me. The moon sat low, silvering the ridgelines like old scars. We pulled off the trail, slid behind a cluster of boulders, and let the horses breathe. My side throbbed again, that graze burning like a reminder stamped into flesh. Clara hopped down first, boots crunching on the sand. When I dismounted, she caught my elbow, steadying me without saying a word. Silence stretched between us, heavy, thick, demanding. Finally, she broke it. "Who carved your name on that bullet?" she whispered. I drew a long breath, let the desert air scrape down my throat. Some truths feel like rusted metal. You can hold them, but they cut you every damn time. "There was a boy once," I said, staring out into the ridgeline. Too young to be calling himself anything more than trouble. Hair full of dust, eyes full of fire. Clara stayed still, listening. She always listened. "Back then I was riding with the crew," I went on. "Hard men, the kind who didn't take prisoners and didn't lose sleep over it." A dry wind crawled past us, stirring my coat, carrying the faint echo of distant hoofbeats. "We hit a freight caravan," I said. "Messy job. One ran from us, a kid barely old enough to shave. My crew said to shoot him." Clara's eyes flicked toward mine, sharp as a knife. "You didn't?" "No," I said, voice low. "Couldn't." I swallowed, throat tight. He dropped his gun, raised his hands, eyes wide like he'd never seen a winter, let alone a raid. And something in me, something stupid, told me to let him run. Clara stepped closer, her voice softened. "That was mercy." "No," I said. "That was a mistake." A shadow passed over the moon then, like the sky itself wanted to look away from what came next. "He lived," I said, "and he learned. Kid grew up carved out of spite and hunger, built himself a name sharp enough to cut the territory in half." Clara's breath caught. "Lark Mason," she whispered. I nodded slow. "Mason," I repeated. "That little boy I let walk. Now he's the bounty captain hunting me across every canyon from here to Perdition Creek." Clara stared at the sand, jaw tight. "And the bullet with your name?" "That's his way of saying he remembers," I muttered. "His way of saying he don't forgive." She stepped back, the realization hitting her like a blow. "He's not trying to kill you," she said. "Not yet." "No," I said. "He wants me breathing, wants to watch me break, wants to show me what mercy costs." Clara swallowed hard. "And what does he want with me?" The question tasted bitter even in the night air. I met her eyes, shadowed, fierce, afraid, all tangled together. "He wants to take everything I've got left," I said. "And right now—" I hesitated, feeling the truth settle deep in my bones. "That's you." A hollow crack echoed across the desert. A distant rifle cocking. Then another. Then the laughter drifted back to us, carried on the dry wind. Mason's riders. Closer. Clara reached for her gun, breath sharp, heart pounding. I grabbed her hand, steady, firm. "This started with me," I said, "and I ain't letting him finish it with you." She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but couldn't. Like part of her knew this was a war neither of us chose, but both of us were already bleeding in. The moon dipped lower. Our shadows stretched long, and the hunt closed in around us. Marrow Creek showed itself like a memory the land wanted to forget. A crooked sign dangled over the entrance, creaking in the wind, letters half peeled, half burned. The once silver town sat quiet under a bruised sky, every window dark, every door hanging open like a mouth caught mid-scream. Clara reined in beside me, scanning the empty main street with eyes that never missed nothing. The wind pushed a sheet of old newspaper down the dirt path until it caught on a dried blood stain spread across the ground like a dark flower. That stain, it wasn't old enough. "Place feels wrong," Clara whispered. "Most places do," I muttered, "but this one's waiting for someone." We dismounted, boots sinking into dust thick as ash. The buildings leaned inward, warped by time and bullet holes. The whole town felt like a trap someone forgot to reset. Or maybe they were waiting for us to walk into it ourselves. We pushed into the saloon. The door croaked like it didn't want to be touched. Inside, the air carried the smell of dry wood, old whiskey, and something metallic beneath it. Not fresh blood, but blood that hadn't been forgiven. Broken chairs lay scattered. A piano slumped in the corner with half its keys missing. The bar was stripped bare, dust thick enough to track footsteps, but there weren't any. That was the worst part. No footsteps meant nobody had left. Clara wandered behind the bar, lantern held high. Her shadow stretched long across the wall. I moved through the tables, rifle in hand, watching corners that didn't feel empty. Then I heard her breath catch. Damn it. I turned. She was standing stiff, pale in the lantern glow, holding a paper she'd pulled from under a loose floorboard. A wanted poster, and her face stared back at us from it. But not the Clara I'd been riding with. This version of her looked angrier, wilder, betrayed. Crime, treachery against the Reyes crew. Bounty, dead or alive, wanted for selling out her own. My jaw tightened. "Clara," I started. She shook her head, eyes burning. "It's a lie," she whispered, voice cracking like the floorboards beneath her boots. But lies travel faster than truth in this territory. I took the poster from her hands. The edges were cut with care. Someone wanted this one seen, wanted it spread. "They think you sold them out," I said. "They think I sold my family out," she shot back, anger beaten under her words. "I didn't. But once a rumor like that starts, it grows teeth." She leaned on the bar, breath trembling. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from rage she didn't want me to see. Half the territory hunted her for revenge. The other half hunted me for her. Hell of a pair we made. Night dropped fast over Marrow Creek, a heavy blanket smothering what thin light remained. We barricaded ourselves behind broken beams on the saloon's second floor, rifles aimed at the street below, backs pressed to cold wood. I could hear her breathing beside me, slow at first, then faster, like she was holding everything together with grit and a few fraying threads. "I didn't betray them," Clara whispered into the dark. I didn't answer at first. Sometimes silence is kinder than truth. Finally, I turned toward her. "I know." She looked up, eyes bright, jaw set, the weight of every lie and every bounty riding on her shoulders. "You don't," she said. "You just want to." "Maybe," I admitted. The wind howled outside, rattling the old shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a gunshot cracked. Far off, but not far enough to be ignored. Clara flinched. Not because she was scared, but because she was tired of running from ghosts that used to be friends. Her breath hitched. Then she grabbed the front of my coat, fingers digging into the fabric like she needed something solid to hold on to. And I didn't push her away. The kiss happened like a gunshot, fast, loud, full of pent-up fury. Not soft, not gentle. It was two wounded souls trying to drown out the world for just one stolen moment. Her hands tangled in my collar. Mine found the small of her back. The whole saloon faded, the bloodstains, the wanted posters, the ghosts. All that remained was the heat between us, and the truth neither of us dared say out loud. When we finally pulled apart, the room felt colder, sharper. She rested her forehead against mine, breath warm, whispering, "They won't stop coming." "No," I said softly, "but neither will we." We sat there in the dark, rifles ready, hearts too loud, waiting for dawn, waiting for the next trap Marrow Creek would spring. Sunrise came cruel that morning, not soft, not warm, just a thin red line cutting across the horizon like a knife sliding out of its sheath. Clara and I were already awake. You don't sleep well when half the territory wants your hides, but dawn still hit like a warning, because with the light came the sound. Hoofbeats, dozens of them, Mason's riders had found us. "Go!" Clara yelled, slinging her rifle over her back. We tore out of Marrow Creek before the shadows of the buildings had stretched across the dirt. Bullets snapped past our heads, hitting the ground in angry bursts. Horses screamed, men hollered obscenities that carried too well in the morning air. Dead Man's Basin loomed ahead, a canyon narrow enough to choke a full-grown bull, with cliffs that scraped the sky and swallowed sunlight whole. "That basin's a graveyard," Clara warned. "Only if we die in it," I muttered. We plunged inside. The world shifted. Sound changed. Every hoofbeat echoed 100 times, ricocheting off jagged walls. Gunfire boomed like thunder trapped in a coffin. The canyon twisted tight, squeezing the air out of our lungs. Our horses skidded over loose shale, stones tumbling down cliffsides into darkness that had no bottom. Then, a shot cracked sharper than the rest. Clara gasped. I saw her body jolt sideways, her hand fly to her shoulder, fingers already darkening with blood. "Clara!" She swayed in the saddle, teeth grit, breath hissing. "Keep riding," she snapped, though the strength in her voice was already leaking out. Another shot sparked off the canyon wall beside us. Another. We were trapped in a storm of bullets with nowhere wide enough to dodge. I veered close, grabbed her reins, and pulled her horse into mine before she could fall. Blood ran down her arm, drip by drip, hitting the saddle leather like hot tar. She swayed again. "No," I growled. "Not you, not today." I dropped from my horse, boots skidding on rock, and caught her before she collapsed. She tried to stand on her own. She always did. But the canyon spun her off balance, so I picked her up, just lifted her into my arms like she weighed no more than the guilt I'd been carrying for years. "Put me down," she muttered weakly. "Not a chance." Dust clawed at my eyes as I staggered forward, carrying her deep into the throat of the basin. Horses thundered behind us. Men shouted. The cliffs funneled their voices until it felt like the whole damn canyon was calling for Clara's blood. Her head fell against my neck. Her breath came shallow. "You're going to be fine," I whispered, even though my voice shook. "You hear me, Clara Reyes? I'm not burying you in this godforsaken crack in the earth." The canyon narrowed into a slit barely wider than a doorway. I squeezed through, packing Clara against my chest, feeling her warmth fade just a touch too much. On the other side, the rock walls opened. Not wide, just enough to see the end of the basin 100 yards ahead. Freedom, if we could reach it. I set her down gently on her feet. She staggered, but stayed upright, pressing a hand to the wound. "I can walk," she whispered. "Good," I said, loading my revolver, "because they're coming." A shadow spilled across the ground then. Long, slow, deliberate. I looked up. There, at the canyon's exit, framed by a pale morning light, stood Lark Mason. Hat low, coat immaculate, hands folded like he was watching a Sunday sermon, and on his face, a smile. Not wide, not cruel, just patient. The smile of a man who finally had what he'd been hunting for. "Morning," Mason called, voice echoing through the stone like a preacher damn proud of his own funeral sermon. "Been waiting on you two." Clara stiffened beside me. I stepped in front of her, revolver raised. Mason didn't flinch. He just tilted his head. "You run well," he said, "but you should know, Dead Man's Basin only has one exit." His smile grew, slow and poisonous, "and I'm standing in it." Mason didn't need bullets to take us, just patience, and the canyon walls hemming us in like a coffin already nailed shut. By the time we reached him, Clara bleeding beside me, the riders had closed ranks. We were done. They bound my hands, kicked my legs out, dragged me through the dust like a man already halfway buried. Clara fought. She always fought, but even she couldn't outpace 10 rifles and Mason's steady, watchful grin. He took us to the ruins of an old telegraph station, a skeleton of timbers and rusted wire poking at the sky like broken ribs. They tied me to a post, rope biting deep into my skin, the desert sun pressing down like judgment. Mason didn't speak at first. He just studied me, slow, almost gentle, the way a butcher looks at a cut of meat before deciding where to place the knife. Then he nodded to his men. They dragged Clara toward a gallows beam left standing from some forgotten hanging. Its shadow crawled across the ground until it touched her boots. "Don't," I rasped, struggling against the ropes. Mason just smiled. "Oh, she's not for hanging," he said softly. "Not yet." He stepped close enough for me to see the boy he once was flicker behind his eyes, the boy I'd spared in a rainstorm years ago. "You know what I want," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was expectant, hungry. "Tell me why you let me live." I clenched my jaw. "I told you. Mercy." Mason's smile died. "Liar." His men tightened the rope around Clara's wrists. She winced but didn't give him the satisfaction of crying out. Mason leaned in, his breath cold despite the heat. "Say it," he whispered. "Say the truth you've been running from." The desert seemed to hold its breath, and somewhere inside me, a door I'd kept locked for years creaked open. "I didn't spare you out of mercy," I said, voice breaking. "I spared you because I couldn't pull the trigger again, because I was a coward." The words scraped out of me like glass. Something in Mason shattered at the sound. Not loud, not obvious, just a small, awful crack behind his eyes. He stepped back, face hollowing. "So that's what my life is worth," he murmured. "A coward's hesitation." His hands trembled once, then hardened into fists. "It didn't have to make you my enemy," I said quietly. Mason lifted his gaze, first to Clara, then back to me, eyes cold, hollowed out by years of dust and resentment. "No," he whispered, "but it shaped the man I became." The sun bled deeper over Dead Man's Basin, turning the ruins red as a fresh wound, and I knew the next move he made might be the one that killed us both. Clara saved us before the desert could finish the job. While Mason barked orders, her fingers slipped down to her boot, found a rust-eaten nail she'd hidden there long before I ever rode beside her. 2 twists, 1 sharp pull, and she had steel in her hand. A moment later, she'd sliced her wrists free and was at my side, rope falling from my arms like shed skin. "Move," she whispered. We ran, stumbling, bleeding, breath burning, into the maze of cliffs behind the old station. Mason's men thundered after us, their shouts twisting between the rocks. The path narrowed until the world opened again at Howland Ridge, a high spine of stone where the wind screamed through the cracks like a dying choir. There was no time to breathe, no time to think. Gunfire erupted the second our boots hit the ridge. Dust storms burst from the cliffs, swallowing half the sky. Men fell screaming into the abyss, rifles clattering after them into endless dark. Clara fought beside me, shoulder soaked red, but eyes sharp as ever. Every shot she fired was a promise she refused to break. Then Mason came through the storm, coat torn, eyes wild, looking more like a force of nature than a man. He didn't draw his gun. He drew a knife. "Only one of us walks away," he snarled. He lunged, blade flashing. We slammed into each other, boots skidding on the edge of the cliff. One wrong step and the earth below would swallow us whole. He drove me back, rage stronger than any man had a right to carry. The knife scraped my ribs, but I twisted, grabbed his wrist, forced him sideways. We struggled on the lip of the ridge, dust spilling into forever. Then I wrenched the blade from his hand and brought him down hard. Mason hit the ground, breath knocked out of him, eyes feral and shining. He expected death, begged for it without speaking, but I didn't give it. I stepped back, chest heaving, blood in my mouth. "I won't kill you," I said. "Not today." The wind went still. Even the ridge seemed to lean in, listening. Mason pushed to his knees, wiped blood from his mouth, and gave me a smile carved out of madness and pride. "Then I'll do it," he rasped. Before either of us could move, he surged up, turned from me, and threw himself backward off the cliff. His coat flared once, then vanished into the endless dark. No man survives a fall like that, not with the rocks jagged as old sins and the drop deep enough to steal the echo of a scream. I stood frozen, watching the dust settle, watching the canyon claim him. Mason died the way he lived, on his own terms, damn the cost. And strange as it was, I found myself respecting the hell out of him for it. A man's pride can be poison, sure, but it can also be the last piece of himself he refuses to surrender. Clara stepped up beside me, breath thin, eyes wide. Neither of us spoke. That's when the hoofbeats came. Mason's riders emerged from the dust, haggard, blood-stained, weapons drawn, and soon enough we were surrounded. Too tired to run, too wounded to fight. One of them dismounted, stared at the cliff, then at us. His jaw clenched, grief twitching behind the grit in his eyes. "What happened to him?" he asked. I swallowed hard. He chose his end. The men looked at each other, not angry, not hungry for our blood, just hollowed out by the truth. Slowly, they lowered their guns. One spat into the dirt. Another bowed his head. Then the first man said, voice rough as gravel, "Ain't no honor in shooting a pair who stood their ground, and ain't no sense in killing the folks he died fighting." He stepped aside. The others followed. "Go," he said. "Ride out of here. A man like Mason deserves to rest without more blood spilling in his shadow." Clara gripped my arm. I nodded once. One of the riders tugged the reins loose and stepped forward, offering us Mason's own horse. The animal stood there trembling, dust on its coat, eyes wild, like it still felt the weight of the man who would never mount it again. "Take him," the rider muttered. "A leader's horse shouldn't wander the desert without direction." The men parted, giving us a road through the dust. Honor ain't common in the West, but in that moment, on that ridge, we found enough of it to ride another day. We watched Mason's riders fade into the distance, slow silhouettes drifting across the basin, heads lowered, rifles slung. They didn't look back at us or at the cliff where their leader had thrown himself into the void. That ridge still felt alive behind us, like the wind carried his pride in every ragged howl. Clara touched her shoulder, wincing but standing tall. I looked over the edge one last time. Pride was the last thing he owned, and he wasn't about to let me take it from him. When I turned back, Clara was already watching the horizon. "They're gone," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Men like that. They know when to walk away. Honor's a strange thing, but they followed it today." The ridge grew quiet. Dust settled. The desert breathed again, like the land itself had finally grown tired of blood. Clara stepped closer, voice soft as worn leather. "What now?" I didn't answer right away, just looked at the long road stretching south, empty, bright, wide enough for two souls who'd run out of places to hide. Then I glanced at the lone horse waiting near the rocks. "We ride," I said at last. A tired smile touched her lips. She reached for my hand, warm, trembling, alive. And with the ghost of Mason behind us and the sun opening a new path ahead, we climbed onto the animal, her in front, me behind, steadying her wounded shoulder with my arm wrapped around her. And together, we head south. Just two souls and a sunrise wide enough for a future I never thought I'd earn.